Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday service of Now Creations. I always want to remind you that no matter what is going on in your life, you have that peace, that calmness within yourself, and the strength and the power to deal with whatever is going on. Hopefully, more and more, what is going on are the good, happy things, but even the challenges are able to be met with that wonderful grace and power from within. Just a comment for tonight. Tonight we're going to be having in our topical conversation the Artemis Project, basically trying to develop an Earth base on the moon. It's a joint project for many nations. It's going to be very, very informative. I encourage you to join us tonight from 6 to 7:30 p.m. You would have gotten an email to that effect. Please join us if you're able to do so. Let's begin. My dear friends, first of all, thank you again for the opportunity of allowing me to address you in these weekly teachings. And I especially want to compliment you for living in such a way that you are modeling for your family and friends and for our planet and for all humanity a way of living that is truly bringing heaven to earth. This is such an important thing that we step up and model what we know to be true. In last week's teaching, we focused on the importance of your soul self, that individualizing part of you that is your free, creative decision maker. It was a joy to be able to see your soul self together again with the upward components of your spirit and source, and with the outward components of your personality self and your worldly self. In today's teaching, I want to focus on your personality self. That today's teaching, in a sense, is entitled The Personality Self, True or False, Friend or Foe. True or false, friend or foe? And again, I think you'll want to take some notes. I will begin with a brief etymology of the word persona, share a very, very important principle, connect the personality self to the worldly self, and then present the expanded version of the personality self in its truest form. Let's begin with the etymology of the word persona, which is the root word of the word personality. The word persona is a Latin word, which means in general a human being. But more specifically, it means the external appearance, the outward appearance of the human being. Also, and more importantly, for a spiritual understanding of one's personality, the word persona also refers to a part played by an actor in a drama, an assumed character. In fact, the word persona originally meant a mask or a false face of usually wood or clay covering the head, worn by actors in Roman drama. Let me just say it again. The word persona originally meant a mask or a false face, usually of wood or clay, covering the head, worn by actors in Roman theater. Note the words an assumed character, a mask worn by actors in Roman theater. These words, an assumed character and a mask, have a much deeper meaning from both a secular and a spiritual view of one's personality. Let me explain. In secular worldly terms, The word personality usually refers to the mental, emotional, and physical aspects of how a person presents themselves in society. Thus, we have the phrase, she has a pleasant personality, which simply means that the person is pleasant to be around, saying and doing the acceptable patterns of social behavior. On the other hand, we have the more negative phrase, a persona non grata, which simply means, as you know, someone is not welcome. Again, these phrases deal with a secular view of the mental, emotional, and physical aspects of your personality. And then we also have that phrase, a wolf in sheep's clothing, which presents more clearly the notion that the personality is really a mask. It is a false face, hiding, perhaps, the real intentions of the person. How many times have you encountered a wolf in sheep's clothing? Encountering such people who were not what they pretended to be. And perhaps maybe there was a time when you were not who you pretended to be because of other mental, emotional states that were more pressing. We are now getting to the root notion of the word personality. It is a mask. It is a mask that may or may not accurately describe the mental, emotional, and physical components of the individual. One never knows for sure what is going on within the individual, within the personality, behind the mask. Now, before we take a spiritual look at personality, let's introduce a principle that is quite helpful in this regard, especially as it will apply to one's spiritual understanding of the word personality. The principle so important is the following. You'll know the principle, and then we'll make the application. The principle is the distinction between something being an end in itself or as a means to an end. When something is considered an end in itself, it means that that something is done for its own sake, such as drinking water to alleviate one's thirst. It's an end in itself. When something is considered a means to an end, it means that it is used for a higher purpose, such as using a cup or a glass as a means to fulfill one's thirst. The glass or cup serves as a means to the end of satisfying one's thirst, the end in itself. Let me just say it again. The glass or the cup serves as a means to an end to satisfy one's thirst, which is the end in itself. Now we are coming to a very interesting and often very confusing understanding of the personality self, which will also provide a basis for eventually spiritualizing the personality self. The confusion is best posed as a question. Is the personality self an end in itself, or simply a means to an end? Let me just repeat it. Is your personality self, your mind, emotions, physical body, place in the world, is it an end in itself, or is it a means to an end? The monumental importance of this question makes me want to repeat it again. Is the personality self an end in itself, or simply a means to an end? As I reflect on my own life, and probably as you reflect on yours, the personality self was initially seen as an end in itself. Let me explain. As each of us has grown and developed in life, the major emphasis seemed to be was to find your niche, your place in the world. Regardless of whatever else was going on, your movement forward was to find that place in the world, your place in the world, and to fulfill it as best you could. And most of us, perhaps all of us, live this way, working on trying to discover our place in the world by way of relationships, job, and style of living. While each one of us had our own unique way of moving through life, the objective was to find your place in the world. Finding your place in the world seemed to be an end in itself. Finding your place in the world seemed to be an end in itself. Until one began to realize that the world eventually lets you down. This is a huge problem. Trying to find your place in the very world that will eventually let you down. Let me explain further. The world often lets you down, or as we say, or sometimes your personality self can let you down in general ways. First, as your personality self makes its way in the world, life is not always clear sailing. As you well know, there are many bumps and bruises that come into your personality self, trying to make its place in the world. Such bumps and bruises often begin with just being a colicky baby, into the terrible twos. And then it often continues into one's early years, as you are told what you're supposed to do and how to behave, that children should be seen and not heard because adults know better. And then those teenage years. You remember those teenage years, especially trying to fit into social groups. And then the onset of puberty. And then going to college or any after high school years, having the additional adjustments and problems from getting one's first job to perhaps getting married. And then you move into those middle years. You have the responsibility to both children and parents. And they just take a toll, let alone saying you have to make enough money to keep up with the Joneses. And then all along the way, there are divorces, deaths of family members, and certain just confusions about the meaning of life, which seems to foster fears and worries. Just seems like I have more anxiety and I'm not quite the way that I'd like to be. I'm frustrated, depressed at times. Now, I don't want to say that all worldly living is filled with bumps and bruises. There are indeed many, many gratifying things in life, such as family joys, meaningful jobs, and simply enjoying all of the beauties in the world, from travel to entertainment. But in the end, the world lets you down. In the end, the world lets you down, not just with everyday bumps and bruises to your personality self, but also with the big three. The big three that the Buddha presented so clearly to us. The big problems of illness, aging, and death. These three biggies, these three big problems always seem to be lurking in the background of one's life, threatening you at any time to wreak havoc either on your personality or on the persona of someone else. Some people just acquiesce, they concede, throw up their hands in despair, saying, well, that's just the way life is, life being the way the world presents it to you. They say things like, well, you know, life's not meant to be a bed of roses, and we live and we die. Well, what are you going to do? In the end, you leave the world, and then you ask yourself that piercing question, well, why was I here in the first place? Yes, there were many good times, but in the end, the world lets you down. Your personality self comes and goes, and you question whether life really does have any meaning. And I think it's true. Life doesn't have much meaning when you simply see your personality self as an end in itself and the world is its goal. Let me say that again. Life doesn't seem to have much meaning when you simply see your personality self as an end in itself and the world as its goal. Now, I don't want to be simplistic about this. The personality self is vital and yet difficult because it has such a grip on us. It has such a grip on us. Again, let me explain. Essentially, what the personality self says is that, well, life is pretty much all about me. It's about my well-being as a human being in the world. Although, again, this me first attitude is often unconscious. We don't even think about it that way because it's kind of the way we're raised. And it's kind of the way the world is. It's just do what you have to take care of yourself. From birth, we are taught this lesson. Take care of yourself. If you don't take care of yourself, no one else will. It's up to you to make your way in the world. You just have to keep moving through the bumps and bruises no matter what, even if life seems to be confusing at times. This notion of life just being about my personality self, this notion of life of just being about my personality self is very difficult to get over. It's hard because we're raised so many times in this way. Even at times when we're very loving and servicing of others, it is still, when push comes to shove, about my family, my job, my church. It's about me. And it's very difficult to break this sense of self-centeredness. I hesitate to call our life experiences selfish. They are not that by any means, but they are often self-centered. It's a big distinction. Much of what you do is not selfish, but it is self-centered. And it's hard to get beyond the self-centeredness of the personality self, especially when it concerns our relationships. This is a big stumbling block for us as human beings. On the one hand, you need the personality self to look out for itself and for its place in the world. You need that. And yet, you realize that such a view not only has bumps and bruises, but also the eventual decline of illness, aging, and death. Well, is there any solution? Is there any way out? Or put it in the context of today's teaching, is the personality self friend or foe? True or false? This is such a big question. Your personality self, mind, emotions, physical body, place in the world, where you live, work you do, friend or foe, true or false? Yes, there is a solution to the problem. But first you have to sometimes hit that rock bottom when you come to understand that the personality self usually ends up insufficient, lacking, looking for more. So let me say that for the past several months, this is what I personally have been working on. Learning to move beyond my personality self. For I, like you, have felt its grip. Its grip of wanting things to be just about me, even when we are kind, loving, and thoughtful. The personality has a grip on us, even when you're loving, kind, and seemingly thoughtful. So what I want to share with you are my experiences of the past several months, as I too, with you, will work through this moving beyond self-centeredness, whether you call it the personality self or by its spiritual name, the ego. That part of you that's just hard to get over, the part of you that is self-centered too much. First, let me acknowledge the obvious. Self-centeredness, it always being about me, is the basic problem of life. And it is difficult to move beyond. I'll say it again. Self-centeredness, it always being about me, is the basic problem of life. And it's difficult to get beyond, even for spiritually seeking people. It's so ingrained in us. It is indeed the way of the world, the way of the human personality. And secondly, yes, there is a way through it, but it takes time and attention and a willingness to look for it. Let me acknowledge the good, first of all, that the personality self does exhibit, and then its limitations. First, you do, yes, you do need the personality self for all of the things it does. It is our connection to the world. Yes, we need the personality self to put food on the table, gas in the car, and have enough money for a standard of living that you want. And yes, it's very important for us. But it will have a greater meaning, as I eventually will point out. But the real problem of the personality self is that distinction that I made earlier between something being an end in itself and something being a means to an end. You recall the example I gave. Filling your thirst is an end in itself. Using a cup or a glass to do so is the means to that end. The real problem of the personality self is that we have made it an end in itself and have linked it to the world, which became its goal. The real problem with the personality self, from a spiritual standpoint, certainly, is that we have made it an end in itself and have linked it to the world as its goal. The solution is to see the personality self as a means to an end, not an end in itself, and not to see the world as a goal for the personality self. Let me repeat this. The solution is to see the personality self as a means to an end, not an end in itself, and not to see the world as a goal for the personality self. Yes, I'm going to repeat that again. The solution is to see the personality self as a means to an end, and not as an end in itself, and certainly not to see the world as a goal for the personality self. You probably are now wanting to ask these two key questions, which I feel are the future of our spiritual evolution. I sincerely mean this. These two questions that I think are the future of our spiritual evolution. The first question: if the personality self, me first, is not an end in itself, but only a means to an end, if the personality self is not an end in itself, but only a means to an end, well, what is the self that is an end in itself? Do you have a self that is an end in itself, beyond the personality self? Second question: if the world is not the goal of the personality self, well, what is the goal of the personality self? If the world is not the goal of the personality self, well, what is the goal of the personality self? These are two enormous questions. And I ask you to think about these very clearly and their importance for your future evolution. Rather than too quickly answering these questions in the few minutes we would have left this morning, I will consider them in detail in the teachings of the next several weeks. The answers to these questions cannot be rushed. They need to be absorbed, need to be experienced, and we will provide ample opportunity for both. In conclusion, you know now the statement of the problem that I have been working on for the past several months: how to get beyond this me first attitude of the personality self, when at one time it was all that we knew. This is huge. Also, you now see the track we are taking, not to see the personality self as an end in itself, but as a means to an end. Please review this teaching several times during the week. It will serve you well as a basis for your spiritual evolution. I am not saying this lightly. It will serve you well for your spiritual evolution. You have to get over your personality self to evolve spiritually. And yes, we're looking at the personality self together. Together, we will evolve beyond the personality self. Let me now bring you into meditation, and what a joy it is to do so. Let's begin, as we normally do, just with a couple of breaths. Just breathing in, breathing out. Allow it to settle you. This teaching this morning was a heavy teaching. It's a heavy teaching. And yet I feel a very clear one, very clear. Because you know its truthfulness. The first truth, very simply, was the personality self has so many bumps and bruises, fears, uncertainties, confusions, anxieties, worries. Surely God or our Creator could have done a little better. Just so many bumps and bruises. And then those big three. Whew. Illness, aging, death. Now there's got to be a better way. And yet it's hard because it's the way we've been raised. Perhaps we've raised others. And it's still about making my way. And then, of course, there's seemingly the goal of the personality self is to come into a satisfying position in the world. Which has its own bumps and bruises. Just consider, for example, relationships, past and present. Has there ever honestly been one without multiple bumps and bruises? Or perhaps present relationships? Is it just the way you would like it? So in many ways, we've been duped. The whole world's been duped for a lot of years. Get so tied up in the personality self, each one of us, and trying to find that elusive place in the world. Always desiring something more. But oftentimes settling for less. I kind of think we can say we have proverbially hit that rock bottom. Then we're ready to make that change. Now, may they say, not with frustration and depression, but with joy and happiness. Joy and happiness, although it'll take some work, it'll take growth and development, that there is just that joy and happiness that is stimulating our future growth. Please review this teaching 2-3 times this week. Mull it over, take a note or two. But just remember, it's our launching point with greater joy and happiness, much greater joy and happiness to come.
I honor
I know that you are sincerely moving forward. So am I. We're doing this together so that we might more joyfully and happily do it together. Please absorb this teaching today. Please listen to it a couple of times, 3, 4. Let it permeate you so that it may be your launching pad. Happily, joyfully. Try to join us tonight if you can as well. Namaste, dear ones.